So here we are.
Here we are, episode 3 of the Career Coven.
Yeah.
I'm Bec.
I'm Annie.
And today we're talking about leadership style and values. We've got lots of really good content that we can talk about, but we've received even better questions.
Yeah, agreed.
From people who have got in touch with us about this topic. So we want to make sure we have a good amount of time to talk about that. I would like to start by talking about something that I learned in a leadership training a few years ago now, and this is about what makes you you, and that's also what makes you really good and what is your key strength. And the concept around this is the light that you shine, the shadow that you cast. And about this is you will excel as a leader by playing to your strengths.
Yeah.
And you can really highly spike on that. However, other people's experience of you will be the dark side of that concept. So to use myself as an example, what I'm really good at, and I think you are too, is around accountability. So I am really good at doing what I say I do, holding other people to account to do what they say they're going to do, and getting things done and getting things moving. The shadow side of accountability is that some people find that really fucking intense. Some people are not deadline motivated. Some people will find that maybe even a bit aggressive. And so having an awareness of whatever your key strength is as a leader and how someone might experience the inverse of that is, I think, really important. So if I know that I am working with someone who really, really finds accountability quite confronting, I have to change my approach to them. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I obviously think that taking high levels of accountability is something that I look for in people I work with and hire, and I think that's just really important to being great, to be honest. But I agree that it has consequences. It has things that you can be aware of, that you need to be aware of. I think definitely in line management, if you are a very kind of get things done and take full ownership for them, if you have someone who is less confident or works less in that way, that can be very difficult for them to understand and adapt to. So yeah, I think the concept, though, which is probably really what you were asking me, of your strongest strength is also your kind of biggest weakness or your biggest thing to be aware of, is 100% true all of the time. I have never not seen that be the case. It's the most visionary people I've worked with are also totally unstructured and really, really hard to kind of pin down, but they have these wild ideas that you would never see come out of other people. And so, one thing comes with the other, and the thing that's really great is always going to be a really great thing, and the thing that's really hard is also always going to be a really hard thing for many people. So yeah, I think that that concept is really, really useful in the guise of talking about leadership, for sure.
I think it's also such a good argument, just building on what you said around the need for diverse leadership. If all of your leadership have the same strengths, you've really missed a trick. And I am sometimes guilty of trying to hire a mini-me, when sometimes what I don't need is a mini-me. I need someone who is good at the things that I'm really rubbish at, so that we yin and yang out. However, that also makes for can be quite a conflicting relationship. Because we have totally different approaches. But I think it's always your job as a leader to try and meet the person who you're leading where they are. And they may come with a different energy. And I've received feedback before that I lead with a load of energy and enthusiasm, and I'm a driver at work, and actually what that can sometimes feel is really exhausting to someone who has just a totally different mode of operating. So I know when I'm sending an email that I'm this is going to send someone into a spiral where I'm going to temper that down, or I'm going to speak to that person before they receive that email so that they know that I'm not dumping a load of work on them and expect it to be done yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I think an important part of leadership is recognizing both the need for diverse strengths and diverse kinds of people around the table, but also I think it is giving those people opportunities to let their lights that they shine to other people as well. So I think part of to keep the kind of light analogy going, it's like sharing the spotlight is a really important part of leadership, I think. And definitely the leaders that I have seen operate the best, but also motivate their teams the most and that people enjoy working with the most are people that don't pretend that all the work was done by them.
Oh, that is like the worst.
That is the worst. And I think that really affects, that has this cascade of confidence impact where everyone doesn't understand why they weren't recognized for that piece and that thing, and it erodes at the people that have done all of this work. And I think that's really, really damaging. So I definitely feel it's really important to know who around the table has the strengths, give them the opportunities to shine, but also to share the spotlight and always to acknowledge that rarely, once you are a leader, is it only you that has done the thing. You are usually getting information from multiple different people, sources. Many of those people will have worked very hard to get you that information. And I think acknowledging that for me is a big part of leadership and what you should, as a maybe non-leader, expect from your leadership if you are expecting high quality leadership.
So many good points in there. I feel and maybe this is something for me to reflect on more. I've sort of grown accustomed to some people taking credit for my work, and that's not even necessarily my line manager, but where you work in a kind of cross-discipline program or whatever. I've had many examples where people take credit for my work, and I feel in some respects that as long as the people who I think are important to me and who I am in my work know that it was me, I don't really care. In fact, I find it quite flattering. I'm like, oh, it's so cute that you thought that you came out with that or whatever. And actually, I talk about this with a couple of my colleagues, that one of the best ways of influencing, and I know we're going to have a separate episode on influencing in the future, is to make someone think that your idea is their idea.
Yeah, that's true.
But I do really hear you on giving people recognition and credit where it's due. 100% think that is part of you rising up. And I would also say, just to kind of double down on the point that you made just then, part of my job as a leader is to get out of the way.
Agreed.
And actually, I am senior enough to know that I actually don't ever need the spotlight unless I want it. And if I want it, I can get it. But it's actually my job to create as many opportunities for my team to be spotlighted as possible and to be their champion and their cheerleader. And when you're managing someone who's really talented, it's really important that you give them that exposure and that increase in responsibilities and stretch them, but they know that you have their back.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, especially once you're in a bigger organization, is sort of the whole point, really, isn't it? It's you are there to point your team in the right direction, to coach them, to get the best out of them, to give them opportunities to have demonstrable business impact, which is also then therefore your team having demonstrable business impact. And their progression is your progression as a leader. And I think that a common misconception about people who aren't in a leadership position, I think, can be that that's not the case. And also, when you've got a really shit leader, it can definitely feel like that isn't what they're trying to do. But ultimately, the point, I think, of leadership is that you're leading a team now, therefore the team's performance as a collective is your responsibility. You are not anymore only responsible for you and you being good at things and you having the answers. And therefore, by definition, I think good leadership kind of acknowledges whether or not, possibly people take credit for different things. But I feel like in those examples, as long as they have acknowledged at some point that you did the work and thanked you for the work that you've done, then it's probably less painful when they say like, and this was my idea and it was actually yours. Like, yeah, I think that's fine. But as long as they have at some stage said, thank you for your hard work, this is so useful, and made you feel like valued and that your work was recognized by them. And I guess that the flip side of what I think is really bad leadership is when people don't feel like their work is kind of taken on board, respected, noticed even. And there are many reasons why a leader might not be like noticing you, giving you the time and attention. Many of those reasons, I think it would be fair to say, are often not to do with you as the individual, but are to do with the things going on in their lives or the things going on at the leadership level that you might not be able to see, that might take up a lot of their
100%.
time. But it is still their job, and what you can expect from your leaders as people being managed by them or being led by them is it is still their job to make the time and to find the time to give you as a team member like what you need, whether that's clarity on direction, whether that is like acknowledgement of the work that you've done. I think that like there is always a reason why you might not send that email saying thank you, or you might not say, just to let you know, I've received that bit of work, I'm super busy, but I am going to get to it. And those small things, I think, are what makes the difference often to the perception of being a great leader versus like, kind of being quite detached.
I will say that a thank you email is really underrated.
Yeah.
Like, it has such a big impact just to say thank you.
Yeah.
Or a reply all saying, that was a really brilliant update. Thank you so much for leading this.
Yeah.
Well
done.
Yep.
Also a good phrase.
Well done is a great one.
That was really useful. Well done. That's like 5, 6.
How would you describe your leadership style?
I definitely am a fan of kind of like subservient model of leadership. I believe very strongly that I'm sort of there to serve the outcomes of the team, not to serve my own outcomes. And I guess within that, humility is a big kind of value of mine that I try and sort of practice in leadership. Every leader that I've seen that I enjoy working with, that is a common thread. They are fairly down to earth. They are humble. I like to be kind to people. I've always tried to be kind. That can be more difficult as you get more senior and have to make harder decisions, but I do actually believe that you can still make hard decisions with and be kind at the same time. It doesn't always mean that person has to receive your decision as kind, but you can try and deliver it in a kind way and conduct yourself in a kind way. I'm sure I haven't always succeeded at that, but I've definitely tried. I spend a lot of time trying to kind of communicate well. I think the communication is always the thing that's like where you get off track, is it's always bad communication. So I spend a lot of time kind of experimenting with how to communicate better, experimenting with the meetings to try and make sure that like people are getting what they need without having too much of a meeting burden. Because I want a high performance culture in every team I've been in. That's what I want. I want everyone to feel like they can do the work to the best of their ability. They want to come to work and they're excited by what they're doing. So yeah, I guess that's some of mine. What about you?
I think when I think about people's experience of being managed by me, what I try to do is emulate how I like to be managed, which is not necessarily how other people like to be managed, but I use that as a baseline of I've had some really awful line managers and I've had some really amazing line managers, and through each of them I've learned something, even if it wasn't necessarily an experience I'd like to do again. There are certainly different elements that I have learned from that I translate into how I run a team. I think what is kind of underscoring that is that I will always be a leader that has high expectations, and that is not something that I apologise for, but I need to always, when I have a new team, devote, and I have like a very specific email that I send about it when there's a new starter, or I'm kind of inheriting a team, that explains my approach to how we do things. And that is because my goal is to get the best performance and the best output from the team. And I have quite particular views about how that should look. I'm open-minded if it could be different, but I have a very high standard overall. And I know that that can be confronting to some people, and we always go through a journey with a new team of people finding that hard and people kind of being like, oh my god, I can't believe she's like this, and I can't believe she's, you know. And I have, especially in the last few years, really come to peace with the fact that I don't really need to be liked. And I actually find it really liberating. I obviously want people to like me, but I'm also okay if they don't. Because it's not my job to be their friend. It's not my job to be their mum. It's not my job to be their therapist.
Their support system. No, it isn't.
And it
is your job to be their manager.
But it is my job to be their manager, and I want to get the best out of them and of the work environment. In the work environment, and I want all of our team to succeed. And basically, you know, I want every light in the chandelier to be glowing. And so that can be a bit difficult for some people who are new to working with me, but I also know that it's really worked for me, and having high standards is something that helps you succeed and grow. So even if they don't like it, I know that it's good for them. So I think that is one thing. So I think it's a blend of, I really want you to be good, and I know that you're going to hate this, but it's really going to work. And that comes from a good place in me for them, even if it takes them a while to realise it. And then I am a driver, much in the same way that I would expect high expectations. I also expect a kind of timeliness to the work. But I also really, as you know from episode 2, have really good boundaries, and I want other people to have really good boundaries. I think it's possible to be effective and efficient, and that probably means stopping doing stuff rather than doing more stuff. And I would way rather do that. And the other thing that I would say is that I'm a sort of like overly empathetic person. I really sponge up people's feelings in my natural state. And I found it really hard when I started line managing, being a sponge for everyone, and I really wanted to play that caring role for them, and that's just not humanly possible.
I agree with that.
It's not sustainable. And so I care really deeply about my colleagues, but I also have to have that emotional boundary there for sure.
I mean, love that you are so unapologetic about your high standards, as you should be. I think that's like such a great answer to that question. And I'm really empathetic too, and it's definitely been a journey to put some light boundaries around that. But as soon as you start managing a bigger team, especially, you know, once you get over like 5 direct reports, I think if you are the emotional sponge of more than that, it's just not possible.
No.
And that doesn't mean that you can't be really, really supportive when you need to, but definitely I feel like there has to be some limits, and part of your responsibility I think your responsibility as both a leader and a manager is that people know where those boundaries are, and they know that you are there to help make sure that they are okay in every way, but your sphere of influence and action is only within the workplace, and you cannot correct or fix or help with anything that sits outside of that, because it's just not really possible or plausible. But I've definitely, you know, as a highly empathetic person, I've definitely kind of totally crossed into the realm of like therapist, supporting, best friend, you know, and every single time I've done that, it has been a fucking disaster. So definitely trying not to do that anymore.
And I think part of this goes back to people pleasing, and there's a really good book by Emma Reed Terrell, I've mentioned her in a previous episode, about people pleasing. I absolutely gobbled it up, it's so good. But there's a really interesting concept around people pleasing, and that is basically that when you are people pleasing, you are training people to expect you to be generous, and
that's interesting.
that they have an expectation that you will give all of that to them. And it's taken me a long time in my leadership to just be less generous, and that makes me sound pretty clinical, but there is only so much that you can give, and they are your colleagues, but they are not necessarily the most important people in your life.
Yeah, and I think this is where there is a big difference between the expectation of female leaders and male leaders. I don't think anyone expects male leaders to be like your therapist, your best friend. Like, I think it is usually reserved for like empathetic, more sensitive female leaders. And yeah, I think that's fucking nonsense. I think there is a happy medium that everyone can strike, which is being a great, empathetic, caring line manager, and that's not limit. That shouldn't be the expectation. Shouldn't be different based on gender. But yeah, I think that women are expected to be nice and to be caring in their role as both a leader and a line manager, whereas I think men are rewarded for often not being that.
So true. And I think this also extends out further, like the expectation. This is probably not the same in the world of femtech startups, but I think in most most of the larger organisation environments that I've been to, the expected onus to do things like organise team drinks, a team lunch, away days, someone's baby shower, blah blah blah. All of that sort of social activity that is, it's taking away from them being able to do their work. Sometimes
people fucking hate it.
Loads of people hate it, and it is a lot of work. It's fairly thankless, and all of that falls to women. I have never seen a man in the workplace organise like a team event.
So I actually have to say and credit someone who was one of both of our friends, but certainly was my old manager. He did all the organisation of team events, but and was exceptionally good at it, and really did take a very kind of pastoral role in the team's kind of overall well-being. Yeah, but I would say that it's very rare. I haven't actually ever seen anyone of any gender take that much responsibility in any organisation. So I think that's actually more about him as a person and what he cares about, and it was like really impressive, because it was a huge amount of work, to be clear. Like, to take on all of that responsibility for a team was big, and it had a lot of benefits, I think, for the size of organisation that we were, which was very small. But yeah, I would say in other larger organisations I've been to, it does tend to fall on women. But I also, I just think that the care expectation is different, like throughout your career and throughout your progression. You're expected to be caring, you're expected to be polite, you're expected to be nice. You're not expected to be harsh or abrupt or...
Yeah, and I think the things that are different for women are really social conditioning that actually starts before work. Like, I think it starts when we're little girls.
Yeah, of course.
And it's something that we have just conditioned to be like, that is just extrapolated out into the working environment.
But what I would say is, like, some of the best leaders I've worked with are women, and I feel very fortunate to be able to say that, and I am absolutely sure that they have all had a huge influence on my career choices. Okay, so I'm going to jump into questions, because we had, I would say, more questions about this than in most of our other topic areas, probably because leadership is basically touches everyone's jobs. First one, and I have to admit I laughed when I read this question, but I definitely think it's true. Why are there so many people in leadership positions without any leadership skills?
Such a good one. So I think historically, and still probably in the majority of organisations now, progressing in your career means managing people, and those are directly correlated. I think there is a real missed trick on not letting people progress as a solo contributor rather than a team leader, because frankly, some people aren't made to lead other people.
Agreed.
And I mean that in the kindest way possible. They have no natural aptitude for it, and I've seen these people, and it is fairly fucking disastrous. And you can learn how to be a leader, of course, but you also have to want to learn.
You have to learn. Yeah.
And you have to put it in practice.
Yeah.
And there are certainly people I've experienced who have done neither of those.
Yeah.
So I agree, it's really annoying that there are people in leadership positions who have no leadership skills. I suppose, how could we answer this more constructively? What would we recommend?
So I think corporates and startups are really different here for different reasons. So one, in startups often there is an individual contributor track. That's been very common, I would say, for like 5 years now. I definitely think that's a great idea. You should absolutely be able, in my view, you should be able to get to C-suite as an IC. If you are that good and you have that much impact on company strategy, you should not have to, I don't believe, take on the management burden. I think being practical rather than just kind of negging on these kind of high flyers. It's like, I think being really practical, if you're being managed by one of them, just tell them what you need. This is what I need. Assert your boundaries, as we've discussed, really clearly, and ask them explicitly, can you do that? If they can, hold them to it. If they can't, then understand why they can't and tell them what for you is non-negotiable. But basically, you're going to have to do some of the management yourself. You're going to have to manage yourself better if you've got a bad line, an inexperienced line manager.
And we've got another episode coming up on managing up, where I think we'll talk about that in a lot more detail. One thing that I would give these sort of people who we've classified as horrible human beings by accident, and not horrible human beings, but
bad line managers,
but probably horrible line managers, is I would also just say line management's hard.
Yeah. Takes a lot of time.
Takes a lot of mental energy, takes a lot of emotional capacity, and every person is different, and every person on the whole planet is kind of weird, and you have to work out like what flavour of weird this person is, and like what motivates them, what demotivates them, what are their ambitions for progression. Like, it's so complicated. So I would also maybe, really depends on who they are, possibly cut them a bit of slack.
Ooh, okay. Not what I expected you to say, actually. I don't know how I feel about that statement. Little shit manager Annie of past, I hope, times definitely feels like, cut them a bit of slack. Really practical Annie, having seen what I've seen, would say, as the leader, if you have people like that managing, you need to fix that fucking fast, because you will lose people so quickly if you have someone managing who does not have the capacity to manage well. And it is not fair on the people you hire to put them into that position. You will not build a high performance organization. And honestly, if people don't want to manage, you shouldn't ask them to manage, because it won't work. And I'm obviously speaking from the position of like startups which have high velocity. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to get other things done that aren't just being a good line manager. But I think from personal experience, I would definitely say that it's unfair on both the people being line managed and the line manager to put people who do not have the skills or the aptitude into that position. And you will just feel the consequences, either as you having to do that job like by proxy through them, or because people will start to leave. Because I think we would agree, me and you, that your single most important person in your organisation is your line manager.
Oh, 100%. That is the person whom like all of your future and support and sponsorship and anything, your requests, they are the controller of all of those outcomes. 100%. So you need to have a good relationship with them, and they need to be good and take their responsibilities seriously. I think when I was thinking about cut them some slack, I was also thinking about like my first line management experience. And I think for anyone listening who's a first-time line manager, you're basically going to brick yourself like the whole time, and it will get easier.
You're only bricking yourself because you
haven't done it. Yeah,
and
because
because you care.
Yeah.
So you're not like the people that really struggle are the people that are the first time or whatever, and they're not good, but they don't really care because they don't want to do it because they don't have to. Like,
yes,
you see what I mean?
Yes,
Those are the people that I'm saying
non-conscientious.
Just take them out of line management because that's not. It's not where they're going to put their time and energy. Whereas little you, okay, no one's a good line manager on their first go. No one's perfect. It is really hard. But the reason you felt like that was because you understood the consequences of what it meant to be a line manager and you wanted to be really good at it.
Yes, okay. Give little me more credit. I think this will be really fairly obvious, and it depends on the level of experience of our listeners today. But, there is a sort of hygiene level of line management, which is like, I have one-to-ones, I understand the strategic direction, I know what the opportunities are ahead, I know how I fit into the organisation's work, I know where I want to be in 12 months, I am supported through all of those journeys. That, I think, is like the minimum level of expectation that you should have of your line manager. And if you're not getting any of those, I would encourage you to make them happen in whatever way works with you and your line manager. I think as you get more experience as a line manager, you get much better. And I think, at least for me, it's much more intuitive now. I don't feel like I need to stress or prep or really think about a one-to-one before I go in, because I already know what's on their plate, what's coming up, what their priorities are. I always think about it before I go in, but it's not like I'm not worried about it. It's much more second nature now, and it does get easier over time. But experience helps.
Okay, what are the most common mistakes in leadership that you've both seen in your careers? And I think this person might have meant that we've both done. And what would you have done differently?
I feel like I touched on this earlier. One of the mistakes I made was just wanting to be liked, but just like people pleasing, wanting to be liked, feeling like I had to go the extra mile all the time. And at the like, it all sort of feels like it was certainly inauthentic to me. Like, I don't feel like I need to go the extra mile now. I don't feel like I have anything to prove as a line manager now. I don't have to. And I think at that time I was more junior and I wanted to sort of really impress people by what an amazing line manager I would be. And actually, like, I feel much more content in myself now and much more confident in my leadership skills, that I don't have to feel like I have to go the extra mile to give my team an experience that at a bare minimum they should expect, but I will exceed their expectations.
So mistakes I've made: being indecisive, always a mistake.
Talk more.
I have just taken a long time to make decisions where I've really in my heart kind of known the answer, and every time I haven't made those decisions, the consequences of like inertia have been quite high.
Can I ask specifically, are you talking about getting rid of people?
Yeah, usually. Or giving feedback. So I think it's usually to do with like negative performance and not acting on it quickly enough.
So like a bit of conflict avoidance.
Yeah, definitely conflict avoidant. And conflict avoidant, but also I think there was a bit of that like wanting to be liked, still wanting to be liked and wanting to be nice and wanting to make sure everyone was happy at work. Now to be honest, I don't think that is my responsibility to make people happy at work. There are a lot of things that can make people unhappy at work. It's my responsibility to make sure they perform as well as they can on every given day and that I don't get in the way. Where I see leaders just like lose all credibility in a couple of sentences with like everyone they've ever worked with is through just kind of like bullshitting their way through and kind of pretending all the good stuff was just them on their own. And like, it's just so easy not to be that guy.
A poorly crafted email can really go down like an absolute sack of shit. And I think, especially if you're a leader and you are recognised as a senior person, people, whether you want to or not, will probably read your stuff, they will probably misinterpret it, and they also might gossip about it.
Yeah.
And you are probably going to be the subject of some chatter, and some of that might not be good about you. And so that, I think, is a really good reminder to everyone to never send the first draft. This also really inspired me for one last mistake before we move on to the next question, is flapping. I have such an ick for leaders who flap. It really annoys me. Because someone...
What do you mean by flap? Indecisiveness?
No, just sort of menial panicking.
Oh.
And I think someone had once told me that as a senior leader, you are paid to be the calmest person in the room.
Yeah, I believe in that consistency.
Yep. Yeah. And it is, if you are senior, everyone is going to see the body language that you have, see you like ripping your eyeballs out, hear you sort of running around, flailing your arms in the air.
Such a good point, actually, now you're saying it.
And that shit is contagious. And it is your job to just be like, this is fine, we're going to work it out.
Yeah,
and I
absorb
think
it.
That is what I spent a lot of time doing crisis response in the pandemic. It was like, oh my God, we've got a 10-minute deadline for like this really important thing for the Secretary of State. And I'd be like, that's fine, we can write this in 10 minutes. Like, here's how we're going to do it. Even though inside I was like, are you fucking kidding? But like, you just have to tell them.
Yeah.
You have to give everyone, even if it is a false sense, you have to give them a sense of confidence that what is happening is fine and it's going to be fine.
Great.
And you cannot be seen to flap, because as soon as you falter, people start losing confidence in you.
Yeah. Totally agree. I think consistency is really important. I think inconsistent leadership is really, really difficult for people. I think it in general doesn't lead to high levels of respect or success. And I am not saying that leaders can't bring themselves to work, but I am saying that I think it gets harder to bring your full self to work as you have more leadership responsibilities, because you do just have to like get your game face on and be very consistent for the people that you lead.
You have to bring a regulated face.
Yeah.
You can't bring all of the faces.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. The reality of C-suite leadership. What are the pains and pleasures? Annie, I'm going to ask you this because your favourite position is CEO.
Not favourite.
And I am a mid-level senior corporate lady. So this one's for you.
Okay. Well, I think if I were just to summarise, once you get to C-suite, I just think it's all about people and money, and that's it. And within money is obviously like the strategy, the company, vision, how you take it forward, how you maybe raise more money, but really, and obviously make more money. But you spend a lot of time just thinking about the bottom line. And then the other thing, which is often the main driver of the bottom line that you spend your time thinking about, is people. Are the people doing the right thing? Are they doing it in a way that reflects the organisation that you want to have created? And what fires are burning in People Town, of which there are usually many.
So many fires.
So many fires in People Town. And yeah, that sounds a bit simplistic, but I'm just not sure what else I would say. Is those are what you spend your time doing, and you have to want to do those things full time to be in, I think, any C-suite role, to be honest. You're no longer usually kind of, well, in small companies you definitely are contributing, but in larger companies you are trusting your teams to do a lot of the output, and then you are doing the synthesis and the so what's from that and the decisions off of that. And that is both exciting in many ways because it's cognitively stimulating and difficult, and the stakes of the decisions are very high. It's also stressful, and it's not going to be for everyone. And if you don't enjoy either making money or thinking about people issues at all, then you're probably not going to enjoy the C-suite, and that is okay.
Not everyone has to be a CEO. I would just echo this. The more senior that I've got, the less I have sort of productively done in terms of outputs, and the more my time has just been spent doing people stuff. And that massively scales, not even in a way that necessarily has economies of scale when your team grows. Every single person will have like something going on in their personal life, or like, you know, someone's getting pregnant, or maybe there's a discrimination case against them, or they're lodging one, or, you know, people are really complicated, and it's not to be underestimated how much of a lift those kind of personnel situations are. And then, you know, there's interviewing, there's like onboarding, there's offboarding, all those sorts of things. I've spent so much of the last 5 years like looking at a staff list, which I don't think I had really realised earlier in my career would be what would be involved in getting more senior. Yeah. But also, I really like people, so that's exactly cool. I love them. I want the best for all of them. So that's just, you know, that's the work that comes with the privilege of leading a team.
Yeah, I agree with that, and you definitely have to enjoy parts of that. Not all of it, but parts of that.
I don't enjoy the staff list, but
I don't know what a staff list is, babe. I don't work in companies that don't have to have a staff list.
But you also have to I think one of the pleasures, and perhaps we haven't spoken about this enough, one of the pleasures of leadership is watching someone like blossom.
Yeah, the best. The best. Oh my god, the best.
Like, so good when like you give feedback, they action the feedback, they get better, and then they're like, I'm ready for a promotion. And I'm like, I think you are ready for a promotion. And then they get a promotion, and then it's honestly, my heart hurts like just talking about it, because it makes me so happy.
Yeah, I get all tingly when I think about that.
That feels like a lovely note to end on.
Yeah, fine. Let's do it.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe if you did like it, wherever you've been listening.